welcome back in. Today we're going to discussing 10 mid-round values that you should be looking to take in your upcoming fantasy drafts. Go ahead and get right into it. We're going to start with the running back position, and we're going to start with a rookie running back, and that is Omarion Hampton, RB17. Now, if you're not familiar with Hampton, he is easily the second best running back from this class, behind Ashton Jitsi, obviously, but he is an incredible athlete, 6 foot, 221 pounds. Had a 94th percentile speed score, a 91st percentile burst score. In 2024, he had 280 carries, 1,600 rushing yards, 38 catches, 373 receiving yards, and 17 touchdowns. He was also incredibly efficient with his touches, 6th in yards after contact per attempt, 14th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 4th in breakaway run rate of 15-plus yards, and 6th in yards per route run. His best comparable player is Jonathan Taylor, but I think a better pass-catching version of Jonathan Taylor. Super explosive athlete, especially at his size. He was drafted 22nd overall by the Chargers. Now, the Chargers did sign Najee Harris over the offseason, and it looked like this was going to be maybe a little bit more of a 50-50 split. But Najee Harris suffered an eye injury over the offseason. Now, it hasn't been necessarily confirmed that it was a firework injury, but that seems more and more what it is. And he has yet to take part in a single practice of training camp right now, which is great news for someone like Omarion Hampton. And honestly, Hampton has taken full advantage of this, and he has looked like an absolute star in camp so far. I think that this sets up very well for Hampton. This very well could just be the 3-down workhorse of this backfield. I mean, Hampton very much is a capable pass catcher. Already mentioned he was 6th in yards per route run. He was also had 60 receptions over his last 2 seasons at North Carolina. And honestly, this is a great situation for him. We already know that Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh really love to run the ball. And he's also running behind one of the best offensive lines in the league as well. PFF has them as the 10th best offensive line heading into 2025. You have one of the best young tackle duos in Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt. They also added Mekhi Becton at guard as well. So everything really aligns. And honestly, at current cost, RB17 now, I think Omarion Hampton is a great value and somebody that I'm going to be investing in. And really, if this continues, he's probably going to rise up the draft board. And then it'll come down to the point of where he's being drafted. Let's keep it moving here, and let's move over to Kenneth Walker, RB15. In 11 games last year, he had a 72% opportunity share, averaged about 14 carries, nearly 5 targets per game, and he had 31 red zone touches last year. Now, he did finish with 16.5 fantasy points per game, which was top 10. He was also 4th in target rate and 5th in route participation last year, and that was pretty big because that was something we've been wanting to see from Kenneth Walker. He was also just as efficient as he always has been, 13th in yards created per touch, 13th in evaded tackles. He was also 5th in juke rate last year. But the reason I like Kenneth Walker so much this year is because this new offensive coordinator with Clint Kubiak coming in and bringing his outside zone scheme, which is a phenomenal fit for Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker in his career has averaged a 5.3 yards per carry on outside zones, where you compare that to Zach Charbonnet, who has a 3.4 yards per carry on outside zones. So I think everything sets up really nicely. We've heard from the offensive coordinator, from the head coach, that they expect Kenneth Walker to be the workhorse back in this backfield. And the biggest question is going to be, can he stay healthy? That has been something that he hasn't been able to do so far. But overall, when he was healthy last year, he was definitely a difference maker in this offense. And I think this outside zone scheme, plus his involvement in the passing game, I think sets up very well for Kenneth Walker. Not to mention, this is a contract year for Kenneth Walker. So I think we could see the best version of Kenneth Walker this season. So I am all in on Kenneth Walker at current cost. Let's keep it moving. Let's talk about a little bit more of a veteran running back that nobody seems to be all that excited about. It's just kind of like he's just there. And that is James Conner, who's currently being drafted RB20. Last year in 16 games, he received a 66% opportunity share, 15 carries, almost 4 targets per game. But he was incredibly efficient last year. 11th in yards per touch, 1st in juke rate, 1st in evaded tackles, 5th in breakaway run rate, and 6th in yards created per touch last year for him. He averaged nearly 16 fantasy points per game. He received an 11% target share. He was also 8th in yards per route run last year. Now, Conner finishes a top 12 running back 6 times last year. It was top 24 in 12 of 16 games. Only 2 games he finished outside of the top 36. So he was very consistent on a week-to-week basis. And honestly, it's kind of wild because if you look, he has now finished in PPR points per game across 4 years in Arizona, RB9, RB7, and RB12 over that span, but he's coming off the board at RB20. I get he's 30 years old, and that is certainly something that that we should take into consideration. But honestly, he showed 0 signs last year of showing down, and all we've heard all offseason is how they fully expect to ride James Conner again. And so if that's going to be the case, I don't know what we're doing with James Conner and why his ADP is currently where it's at. He should be going higher than what he is. because of the expected touch share, the expected involvement in the passing game. And honestly, he just doesn't look like he's quite washed yet. And so that being said, I am perfectly okay with taking James Conner where he's going back half of the fifth, early sixth round right now. Lastly, let's talk about another rookie, and that is going to be Kaleb Johnson, RB 27, 71st overall. Now, again, if you're not familiar with him, 6'1", 225 pounds, drafted in the third round out of Iowa. Johnson broke out in 2024 with 1,500 rushing yards, almost 200 receiving yards on 22 catches and 23 touchdowns. Johnson enters a situation in Pittsburgh with a massive opening for early down work. Najee Harris, who left to sign with the Chargers, vacated about 16 carries and 3 targets per game with a 60% opportunity share. And I fully expect Kaleb Johnson is going to slide right into that role. I don't think they're going to change Jaylen Warren's role whatsoever. I think they like him as that third down, change of pace back. And I think Kaleb Johnson is going to slide right in right there. And we know this is a very run-heavy offense. They ranked 28th in passer rate last year in 2024. I don't see that changing in 2025 with Aaron Rodgers there at quarterback. And so while they do have a very young offensive line, it's actually the youngest offensive line in the league with 3 starters entering year 2. And then you also have left tackle Broderick Jones entering year 3. But I think, if this offensive line can gel and really put things together, I think this offensive line can be better than what it's being projected right now. But either way, Kaleb Johnson at cost is a smash value right now. I think he can easily outperform his ADP and finish inside the top 20. Let's keep it moving. Let's move over to the wide receiver position. We're going to talk about Courtland Sutton, wide receiver 23, 53rd overall. Now, I'm a little surprised he's actually not going a little bit higher, considering he averaged 8 targets per game, a 25% target share. He was definitely utilized as a deep threat. He was 7th among all wide receivers in deep targets. He was also heavily involved in the red zone, 8th in red zone targets last year, 81 catches, 1,000 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns, and 14.1 fantasy points per game. Now, his 59% catchable target rate was obviously not great, which was 96. He was very inconsistent last year to start the season, 8 or less PPR points in 4 of the first 7 games. But after that point, he really took off, which is when really coincides well when Bo Nix really started to put it together. And from week 8 on, he was the wide receiver 8 overall. And so I don't really understand why he's going at wide receiver 23. I feel like he should be going a little bit higher than that. I feel like Bo Nix should be able to take a step forward this year. 2025, this year they did draft Pat Bryant in the 3rd round and signed Evan Ingram. So there's a little bit of target competition here. But I don't see any scenario where Courtland is not the target hog again in this offense. They also just signed him to an extension worth $92 million over 4 years. So Courtland Sutton, for me, at cost, is a great value right now. Let's move over to another rookie wide receiver. We're going to talk about Tetairoa McMillan, wide receiver 60th overall. McMillan was drafted 8th overall by the Panthers. He is a big, physical, prototypical X wide receiver, stands 6'4", 220 pounds. He averaged a 31% target share, recorded at least 80 receiving yards in 65% of his games the last 2 seasons. And he finished 2024 with Arizona with 84 catches, 1,300 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns. Now, having Dave Canales, the head coach, would generally be a positive for McMillan. Canales served as the Seahawks passing game coordinator in 2020 and in 2021. In those 2 seasons, DK Metcalf posted double-digit touchdowns and recorded career highs in receiving yards. And then Canales moved over to the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which once again, Mike Evans, the ex-wide receiver, scored 13 touchdowns and had his best receiving yards total since 2018. And so with both Metcalf and Evans serve as clear extra wide receivers, I think when you look at this system, I think this sets up very well for Tetairoa McMillan. He's going to see plenty of opportunities inside the red zone, as the Panthers were 4th in red zone passing rate last year and top 12 in passer rate inside the 10-yard line last season. We know investing in rookie wide receivers tends to pay off in a big way. Since 2010, 21 wide receivers have posted 16-plus fantasy points per game from week 9 on. And so I think Tetairoa McMillan could definitely fit into that role. Really, it's just going to come down to Bryce Young and how he performs this year. Can he maintain what he did over the second half of last season? Once he came off that benching and once he came back, he looked like a different player. This offense was very fun to watch. And so I do think Tetairoa McMillan could step right in, be the leader in targets here. You're talking about Adam Thielen, who's another year older, Xavier Legette, and Jalen Coker, who are the other wide receivers that are there. So I think this is a very easy pick at cost. Wide receiver 28, 60th overall. Speaking of wide receivers that I'm interested in, George Pickens, wide receiver 30, 70th overall. In 14 games last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers, he had 900 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns, but averaged 11.7 fantasy points per game. He was 4th in deep targets, 15th in red zone targets, but he had a 67% catchable target rate, which was 71st among all wide receivers. He was 28th in yards per route run, 14th in yards per reception. but he caught passes from Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, and he's never had a quarterback anywhere close to the talent of Dak Prescott. He's a great fit with what Dak does really well. Dak is ranked 12th, 4th, 19th, 11th, and 3rd in deep ball completion percentage in his career. There should be plenty of volume going around as the Cowboys ranked 4th in pass plays per game last season, and they don't really have a running game to really focus on here with Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, and then if Jaden Blue can secure a bigger role within this offense. But still, I feel like this is going to be an offense that's going to throw the ball a lot. And I think Pickens can easily outperform this wide receiver 30, this middle of the road wide receiver 3. I think top 20 finish is definitely in his range of outcomes this year. I love George Pickens. And if his ADP remains here, I'm going to have a ton of George Pickens in my leagues because I think he can absolutely smash at this cost right now. I know not a lot of people are not as excited about the Cowboys or whether it's Dak Prescott, but Dak Prescott has put up 20 fantasy points per game in 4 of his last 6 seasons. I know he's coming off a down year last year, but I think he bounces back big time this year. And I love investing in Cowboys this year. And lastly, let's talk about a veteran wide receiver. I'm not really sure why he's going at wide receiver 31, 71st overall. That is Calvin Ridley. He averaged 7 targets per game with a 24% target share. Remember the first half of the year, DeAndre Hopkins was still there getting targets. He is now gone. He finished last year 4th in market share of air yards, 3rd in deep targets, 59th in red zone targets, was something that we would like to see change, and a 59% catchable target rate last year, ranked 97th. Now, obviously, we know that the quarterback play was anemic last year with Will Levis at quarterback, with him drafting Cam Ward with the number 1 overall pick this year. But so I actually think Calvin Ridley could have a much better season this year with his 64 catches, 1,000 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns. He was 23rd in yards per team pass tip, 1st in unrealized air yards last year. But like I said, with how dreadful the quarterback position this year, and really, I think he should easily surpass this target share this year. I think Cam Ward is somebody that's not really being talked about. He's not a sexy quarterback this year that we typically see from quarterbacks that are drafted as high as he was. I don't think people are really excited about the Titans at all. But I think Calvin Ridley easily could finish as a top 20 wide receiver this year. I don't understand the current cost. If he is, we're just going to keep drafting him, and he can be a very solid wide receiver 4 on our rosters. Let's move over to the tight end position. We're going to start with David Njoku, tight end 9, 86th overall. Last year in 11 games, he averaged 13.4 fantasy points per game, which was top 4 among tight ends. He had a 23% target share, averaged 8.8 targets per game. He has finished as a top 8 tight end in each of his last 3 seasons. He's also an obvious red zone threat with his 49 red zone targets over the last 3 seasons, his 2nd most among tight ends and 12th most among the entire NFL. And so David Njoku is obviously somebody that's heavily involved once you get down in the red zone. And now obviously he has suffered a little bit of injury last year, but he has been extremely consistent. And if you remember, in 8 games without Deshaun Watson at quarterback last year, he actually averaged 16.2 fantasy points per game last year. So I don't know why he's going tight end 9. I get the quarterback position isn't great, but he hasn't had a good quarterback in the last couple of years. I know he had Jameis Winston last year, and Jameis Winston's a lot of fun, but I wouldn't classify Jameis Winston as a great quarterback. Now, don't get me wrong, they have Joe Flacco and Dylan Gabriel and Kenny Pickett and Shedeur Sanders, and so there's a lot of uncertainty there. But I think at the very least, I think there's a lot to like with David Njoku's profile. I think we can all agree he's still going to be heavily involved in the passing game. And if you can get him at tight end 9, 86th overall, he's a pretty easy click. Now, if you don't want to draft David Njoku because you're not excited about him, the next guy I'm talking about is somebody that I'm really excited about drafting, and that is Tucker Kraft, tight end 11, 113th overall. Now, last year, he had 707 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, and 9.6 fantasy points per game. He was 2nd in yards per route run, 6th in yards per team pass attempt, and he was 2nd in yards per reception. Now, obviously, the injury to Jordan Love last year really hurt this offense. The Packers last season were 30th in pass rate, due in large part because of Jordan Love being banged up. In 2023, the Packers threw the ball 57% of the time, compared to that to just 48% in 2024. They were last in the league in passer rate over expectation last year. But I will say, even with the injuries, Jordan Love was top 5 in yards per attempt, adjusted air yards per attempt, and air yards per dropback. He also ranked 4th in QBR last year. So while the injuries certainly hurt Jordan Love last year and really made this offense really a little bit more one-dimensional and be much more of a run-first offense, I do fully expect them to tilt this other way and get back to being a more pass-heavy offense this year. We've already had Matt LaFleur come out and talk about wanting the offense to flow more through Tucker Kraft this year. And while there's question marks about guys like Jaden Reed or Matthew Golden, who they drafted this year, I think Tucker Kraft is going to be a smash value this year, and he finishes a top 5 tight end, and he's being drafted at tight end 11 right now. So I really like Tucker Kraft. I think the upside is very high with Tucker Kraft right now. And somebody that if you're wanting to wait on tight end and you're foregoing drafting that early round tight end like a Trey McBride or a Brock Bowers or a George Kittle, and you're wanting to wait on tight end, Tucker Kraft was really a great option here at tight end 11, 113th overall. So let me know in the comments section below what your thoughts are on some of these guys, or let me know who are some other players going in the middle rounds that you're really excited about drafting this year. Let me know in the comments section below. We'll see you on the next one.